One of the most common questions I get from business owners is, what should I charge? And look, there's no single answer, but there's some principles that will help you figure out the right number for your business. But here's the thing, a lot of business owners are undercharging, not because they don't know their worth, but because they've actually never done the maths on what it costs to deliver their service. So today, I want to walk you through how to think about pricing. Whether you're a mechanic, a tradie, a consultant, an accountant, whatever. If you sell your time and expertise and your teams, then this applies to you. So, section 1, let's look at the true cost of an employee. Let's start with a reality check. If you're paying someone $65,000 a year, what does it actually cost you to have them on the tools? Well, most people think, well, 65,000 divided by how many ever hours they work, but that's wrong. Here's why. First, they're not working 52 weeks a year. Once you take out annual leave, public holidays, sick leave, you're actually probably looking at 44 weeks of actual work. Second, they're not productive every single hour at work. There's admin, there's training, there's time between jobs. A realistic productivity rate might be 80 to 85% of the time that they're at work is actually billable. So that 65,000 salary, once you account for superannuation, leave entitlements, and the hours they're actually generating revenue, the cost per productive hour is a lot higher than you might think. And I've done a spreadsheet that I've shared, or we use in our internal team, that I've also shared training other accountants on this concept. And I'll pop that up on the screen now. So here we are. I'll fly me in here. So what we've got here is, and again, I just use this in the context of an accounting firm, but let's look at the junior accountant one here. We've got a $65,000 salary. Now, for this sake, I've included super in this. Working 44 weeks a year, 37 and a half total hours each week at a 85% productivity rate. So that's for every for every 10 hours that they come to work, 8.5 are actually billed to a client, or that's the target anyway. So that means total charged hours each year. And in the accounting industry, there's this thing called write-offs. I don't necessarily agree with them unless they're to do with things like training or rework that shouldn't happen and shouldn't be incurred to the client. But let's assume 0% for that. Then the hours actually billed, net of write-offs, are 1,400 for the year. Now, in the accounting industry, and I sort of feel like this applies to many different service industries, there's a rule of thumb for 3. And in terms of this one, now here's where most business owners go wrong. That they figure out their cost per hour, add a bit of a margin, and call it a day. But that bit of a margin is usually nowhere near enough. In professional services, the rule of thirds that I think translates really well into any service business means that for every dollar that comes in, roughly a third of that goes to wages, a third of that goes to operating expenses. And I might distinguish that the first third to wages is for the people delivering the service. There might be additional wages like admin and marketing that would actually fall in my definition of operating expenses. And the other third for a service business is profit. Now, if we think of that as a percent, for every dollar we bring in, if the target is 33% net profit at the end of the day. Now, that's a very simplified model. There's more to it in other businesses. For instance, if your business sells not only time but materials, if you're an IT professional business and you're selling, servers and computers as well, that needs its own structure to how to price those things. You need to make a margin on that. You need to make profit on that. But I'm very much talking to the actual running of the labor behind delivery. So again, recapping, a third goes to the wages, in my context, the accountants. A third goes to OPEX, which is rent, laptops, any other consumable materials that's not directly billed to a client, including, as I said, salary for admin and marketing. And that last third, ideally, is profit. I'm not going to say that by doing this you'll 100% make 33% net profit at the end of the day, but if our goal is to increase profitability, then that's going to be at least a nice target to aim for. Your business might have different things like vehicle costs, insurance, tools and equipment, software, marketing, the coffee in the break room. We need to consider that that's all operating expenses, and we need to pay for that out of what our accountants, IT consultants, mechanics are actually billing for. If you're only charging enough just to cover the wage and a small margin, let's say 20% on top of that, you're not going to be actually making money. You're going to be just staying busy and unfortunately not moving the needle forward. So how do you get to a number that makes sense for you? The simple rule of thumb is just to multiply their fully loaded labor cost by 3. So again, I'll pop that back on the screen. In this context here, it actually does the maths for you, but the charge out rate, so to speak, with these factors here is roughly $140 per hour, and that's taking their true hourly rate, timesing it by 3, and you could times it by more. Like if you want to make or factor in a different margin, you can times it by 3.5, whatever you want to do here, and I'll give you access to this spreadsheet in the comments so you can create your own. Now it does say at the top here to edit this for yourself, copy and edit the sheet in the file menu. I'll move me out the way for a sec, but what it means here is that file, make a copy, because you won't be able to edit mine, my template, and then you can go and create your own version of this. Change the titles obviously, because depending on what business you run, and then you can tweak whatever you want here. But what you want to walk away with is a target hourly rate per person in your business, or per role type if you've got multiple people paid the same rate. Okay. Now, for a $65,000 employee, that might feel high. You might be thinking, my competitors charge less than that, and maybe they do. But here's the question: are they actually profitable, or are they just busy? Because a lot of businesses out there are charging what they think the market will bear, not what they actually need to charge to actually build a sustainable business. Some of them will figure out that eventually. Some of them won't survive long enough to figure that out, unfortunately. So, for businesses who are wondering, what about parts and materials? If your business involves selling parts and materials alongside your labor, you need to think about margin on those separately. The margin on parts is typically lower than on labor. You might be looking at 20 to 40% on top of what it costs you, depending on your industry. Some of you might even have recommended retail prices for stuff, and you buy it wholesale, and the margin's already baked in there. And also whether you're dealing with generic consumables or specialized parts. The key is to not let parts revenue subsidize underpriced labor. They're two different profit centers. You need to track them separately in your zero file. Your labor rate needs to stand on its own. For consumables, things like oil, grease, cleaning supplies, I'd factor those into your operating costs rather than trying to itemize them per job. Keep it simple. Now, switching gears again, competitive research. Now, I'm not saying ignore what your competitors charge. Do the research, ring around, check their websites, get quotes if you can. But here's what the information tells you and what it doesn't. It tells you that the market is used, it tells you what the market is used to paying. It tells you where you sit in that range. What it doesn't tell you is whether those businesses are profitable, whether they're going to be around in 5 years, whether their owners are paying themselves properly, or just taking whatever's left over. You might find out that your competitors charge less. That doesn't mean you should match them. It might mean you need to be better at communicating why you're worth more. Better service, more reliability, actual warranty on your work, whatever your point of difference is. Or you might find out you're already cheaper than most of the market. In which case, why? And my final point here is the power of 10%. I want to leave you with this because it's the thing that surprises most business owners when they actually do the maths. Let's say your business is running at a 20% net profit margin. Again, for every $100 we bring in, our profit at the end of the day, once everything's paid, is $20 or 20%. That's decent. Not amazing, but decent. Now imagine you increase your prices by 10% across the board. And let's assume, just for argument's sake, that you don't lose any clients as a result. Now I know that that's a big assumption, but stay with me. That 10%, just by changing the price by 10%, goes straight to your bottom line. Your costs haven't changed, so your profit doesn't go up by 10%, it actually goes up by 50%, because your 20% net profit percentage moves to 30% profit. Same clients, same work, same hours. Obviously, some clients might push back. You might lose 1 or 2 price sensitive customers, but often the clients you lose on price weren't your best clients anyway. The maths is worth doing for your business. What would a 10% price increase actually mean for profitability? So that's the framework. Know your true costs, apply the rule of thirds, do your competitive research, but don't assume competitors are profitable, and don't be afraid to charge what you're actually worth. If you want to play with the numbers for your own business, I've got a link to the hourly rate calculator in the description. Have a go. You might be surprised what the numbers tell you. And as always, if you've got questions about any of this, please reach out. That's what we're here for.